He dodged the flaming projectile and activated the magic sign on his palm, noticing a delay of a few moments before his body felt the increasing heaviness. Several people were seated on the stone steps in the semi-darkness of the alley, and on the roof stood a motionless figure, watching the noisy village street. The story mentioned free lessons in food distribution, and a group of children were walking down a crowded street, a dark-haired boy and a fair-haired girl walking side by side. An attempt to join the adventurers ended in failure. He was stopped by guards, who said that only members of the guild were allowed to pass, and he remembered the day of his first registration. The man turned to a girl named Ice, who admitted that she had joined the Seekers to be able to stand up for herself, while another listener listened attentively to her words. The woman mockingly noted that Icy would never be able to become a real adventurer, and the others discussed her past and were surprised by her appearance in this place. He scratched his head and noted that it did not concern him personally, and at that time there was another person behind him. Later it was said that he officially became a cadet. Kneeling and breathing heavily, he heard the words of the writer, who claimed that the life of an adventurer was always associated with risk, and the body must withstand the tests. The mustachioed man shouted orders at those running around the circular arena, urging them to speed up as if their fate depended on their speed. Another commander loudly urged the adventurers at the table, demanding that they eat as if it were a matter of life and death, while the cook brought out a huge bowl of food. The young man with a short black haircut was hastily gobbling up a sandwich, while holding another piece in his other hand. Clenching his fists and gripping the two blades, he recalled how his exhausted body rapidly gained strength thanks to continuous training. He swung his weapon to strike, then caught the falling cup and rushed forward with his comrades. The company looked up as a carriage adorned with a magical symbol approached the building, and one of the companions pointed out that this was the place they needed. Flame raised his hand and declared his intention to become a mage, and his two friends shouted back, excited at the prospect of gaining powerful sorcery and becoming a silver sword. The guild united mercenaries, hunters and dungeon explorers, and the status of silver was considered an indicator of an experienced warrior. The three recruits stood shoulder to shoulder and the stern man looked at them carefully, after which Clay placed his hand on his comrade's shoulder, asking if he was ready to maintain his composure. Clay shouted his name, to which he calmly replied that he was outwardly unperturbed, although in his soul he was overcome with fear of the possible loss of magic and the impending danger. Flame raised his fist sharply and began shouting threats, from which his comrade instinctively retreated, and the others hastened to warn that starting a fight at this moment was extremely unwise. Two people were engaged in a heated argument, but an imposing figure appeared, silencing everyone and announcing the beginning of the initiation ceremony into magicians, and those gathered eagerly awaited the announcement of their names. The squad lines up as Flame is ordered inside, and Clay excitedly holds up his palm with a magical symbol, declaring his mastery of fire and his heroic path. Flame raises his burning hand to approving applause, after which the man calls out the next one, and a close-up shows a clenched fist in confirmation of readiness. The mentor talks about the dexterity of wind magic and the reliability of the earth, while the woman demonstrates the healing power of water, and signs of elemental charms appear over the fallen man. The narrative states that the power of spells gradually weakens as one moves away from the magical core, so seekers are advised to strive for rare chances and luck in order to succeed. He explains that his gift is related to gravity, which only pulls the caster's body downwards, and he himself considers this the most unsuccessful form of slow magic. Despite this, he claims that he has no right to give up yet, and appeals to the crowd not to jump to conclusions until attempts have been made. Clenching his fist, he challenges his opponent, while the other man, who has come such a long way, also vows not to back down. He fell to the ground, confused, thinking that this was a ridiculous joke, and his opponent laughed loudly, mocking him and demanding to look him straight in the face. He curses the cruelty of random magic, calling it merciless, and the scene switches to a falling man, confused about the meaning of the mysterious term. Lying on his bed, he wonders if he has been reborn, and noticing a magical sign on his palm, he realizes that his power is linked to gravity. Looking at the seal on his hand, he decides to test the spell, remembering how new spells can evolve and become stronger, like levels in a game. Activating the magic, he doubts the correctness of his actions, but concentrates when the gravitational force envelopes his body and prepares to strike with his sword. He sits in a tavern, reminiscing about the past and thinking about how there is no universal education in this world and even the idea of gravity has not been developed. While eating, he reflects on the difficulty of gaining weight while using new spells, while feeling weak in body and becoming despondent. Clay greets his comrade cheerfully, reminding him of his advanced class selection and yesterday's initiation ritual, while he looks depressed and tired. The woman asked about his gift, and he admitted that his abilities were related to slowing gravity, showing a magical seal on his palm. One of the men asked Flame when he was going to leave, and then another called out to him. He told Clay not to dwell on the small stuff and reminded him that a seeker's life hung in the balance every day, then offered breakfast and slammed his fist on the table, causing his friend to react. Flame challenged him to a duel, doubting his courage, and he agreed to fight in 2 days, having learned that the use of magic was allowed in combat. He raced across the field, thinking about how to use the extra mass to his advantage, and activated a spell that caused dark orbs to appear around him. They raced across the vast arena, and as they did so, he mentally controlled the power of the spell, then suddenly accelerated, releasing a stream of energy from his palm. Using a gravity spell, he fell to the ground, and Clay raised his hand with flames, instantly attracting the attention of the audience. Flame practiced his fire skills by throwing a red-hot ball at the monster, but his mentor warned him not to damage the equipment, and he complained about the durability of the dummies. Clay collided with his comrade, causing him pain, and those around him immediately began to discuss what happened, questioning his resolve and goals. The fair-haired youth mockingly assured his opponent that his wind magic was unrivaled in speed, but the dark-haired one met these words with a serious look and accepted the challenge. He activated the magic circle on the ground, and a humming sound was heard all around as the force announced the increase in heaviness. Grabbing his opponent's wrist, he stopped his movement towards the brick wall, preventing him from reaching his target. Someone dismissively called him a weakling, and Clay stood in the hallway while the others argued about their comrade's fall, not understanding the real reason. The man loudly announced to the crowd that the sparring had begun, reminding them that everyone had magic and could use it, and then called out the first pair. At the training ground, Flame approached them and mockingly called him a slow wizard, but he calmly responded, remembering the previous conversation and showing confidence. Flame challenged him to a duel, promising to crush him without effort, and he responded by silently preparing himself, clutching his shield tightly. The enemy met his gaze with a bold challenge, preparing for a fight, and he, on the contrary, was internally preparing to knock him to the ground. Clay scathingly criticized him for using the shield, considering it a sign of weakness, but he calmly picked it up and admitted that it was gravity that scared his friend. He dodged a flying fireball launched by Clay, who yelled at him for being slow and cursed under his breath as he continued to dodge. With his shield and sword he deflected the projectile, sending it back, and thought that with one blow the battle could be ended. Clay challenged him again and he accepted, activating the seal on his hand while Ice watched their fight with interest. He deflected the attacks as he brandished his weapon, and Clay surrounded himself in flames, whereupon he explained that his magic made everything he touched temporarily heavier. As he prepared to strike, he focused on the moment when the slowing effect would be enough, and his opponent stood in front of him, blazing with a fiery aura. The crowd greeted his statement with doubt as he raised his weapon and activated the enchantment, claiming the fight was over. Clay, exhausted and angry, sat among the broken woodwork, shouting curses and struggling to get up as he calmly walked away. He declared that he was chosen by fire and would become the next great hero, but Clay interrupted him by shouting a protest and throwing a flaming ball while simultaneously activating his shield with the wait-up move. The man, engulfed in flames, screamed hysterically from the heat, writhing in agony and unable to cope with the pain. He ordered one of his allies to hold on, while Clay dismissively dismissed the idea of holding back in the face of a blow that was shown to be cowardly, and a crowd of spectators gathered around the fenced area. The girl addressed him as a master, while in the background people crowded around the fire, and he stood out in the foreground. The students whispered about the slow wizard who had succeeded despite rumors of Flame's comatose state. Flame himself clenched his fists and demanded a break. He walked away from the group of cadets, considering leaving the site to avoid the encounter, and noting the changeable mood of the others. The man stepped up onto the platform and addressed the crowd about the upcoming field training, explaining in detail the restrictions on numbers and the freedom to choose the composition of the units. The same mentor advised him to find a suitable match, and he clenched his fist, immersed in memories of his past life and the bitter experience of slavery. One of the fighters refused to let him join because of his partner's fear after the recent conflict with Flame, and the woman added that their team was already fully staffed. He remained alone by the barrels in the village square, pondering his chances of joining the group and deciding not to return to the squalid slums. In front of his eyes, Stella grabbed Ice by the collar, screaming sharply, and he watched what was happening with bewilderment. Ice demanded that the other girl join her party due to her mastery of ice magic, but she seemed hesitant to answer. He continued to watch the two women argue, and one of them repeated the cry, demanding that her opponent remember her words, and he became more and more surprised by the situation. Stella insisted that the ice wielder join her group, while the story mentioned a water-wielding queen and another girl who was reprimanded by Drop's mentor. He came closer just as Ice called her spells useless without allied water magic. The water wizard offered to help her, but the girl pushed him away sharply. At that moment, he stood over Clay, declaring that he was too arrogant and not worthy of high marks compared to Flame, while Clay muttered something about recruiting an ally and was ordered to leave. Stella awkwardly asked him about his consent to accept her into his squad, visibly nervous. She then laughed and mockingly stated that ice mages were of no use to anyone without the support of water, emphasizing her own superiority, and he only wondered if his rival was really that limited. He agreed, much to the surprise of both women, and explained the details of what was happening while standing next to one of them in the hallway. Introducing himself as a gravity mage, he heard AI say her name and they exchanged promises to do their best in the upcoming dungeon expedition. The leader orders the party to explore the upper level of the dungeon, destroy 3 monsters and return, adding a warning to retreat if the enemy is too strong or if allies are injured. The man talks to the group that Stella is a part of, and she talks about the limits of magic and exercises involving monsters. They discuss the deadly risks of the dungeon and the task of reaching the 5th floor before graduation, with 2 of them looking at each other intently and the third dismissively calling the threat empty intimidation. The crowd listens to the mentor explain that those who reach the depths will receive a bronze adventurer badge, and this causes a wave of surprise. Suddenly, a loud cry is heard. The mustachioed man recalls the 9 cadets who died last year, stressing the danger of the dungeon, and then asks if there are any questions, but the audience remains silent. The training begins, he stands confidently, and the girl next to him asks him to show maximum effort, to which he agrees. Another woman sarcastically asks if they can survive alone, mocking their strength, and a man nearby asks what exactly she means. Flame declares a last chance to release someone from control, while the two he and Ice remain silently together. He calls his opponent a fool, but Stella angrily reproaches him for his rudeness and demands that he admit his own ignorance. He claims that there are enough of them and tells her to go with them, and she responds defiantly, turning to the group standing behind her. He and Ice discuss a girl who never wanted to join their company while standing on a wooden bridge over a canal where ships sail. Ice expresses her hopes to maintain their friendship after graduation, and he agrees with her words, and she nods in response. They find themselves in a suspended wooden cage inside a cave. He lights a torch and secures a rope to the wall. With a torch in hand, he walks forward, and Ice follows him, nervously confirming that she will pay attention, and he notes their good equipment at the entrance to the dungeon. The chest is overflowing with gold coins, and the merchant recalls the story of the king, a former adventurer who became rich in the dungeon and who was best not to anger. The dragon guards mountains of wealth, adventurers stand before it, and coins rain down around the skull as the figure walks away, showing indifference to the gold. He is about to throw the torch into the dark corridor. Another participant confirms his readiness, and he clenches his fist, preparing for action. The sword in his hands falls on the goblin, and the severed head flies into the air. The blade cuts the monster in half, and its dying scream echoes throughout the hall, and he is surprised to recognize his own overconfidence. He notices the body of the fallen creature cracking, and Ice appears behind him, holding out her hand and noting that she made it in time. Wade and Ice stand together in an empty coliseum near several training dummies as a voiceover reminisces about the day they decided to team up. Ice apologizes and doubts her powers, calling herself deadweight, while Wade looks at the ice magic figurine and asks why she thinks that. The woman asks the man to pour water on the mannequin and then casts an ice spell while it stands there all wet. Ice freezes a training dummy with ice magic while Wade watches, and they discuss the importance of water in combat. Wade asks to see what happens without water, then Ice calls out an ice attack, and Stella hesitantly agrees. Ice casts a spell that hits the training dummy, then a magical explosion occurs, which Wade and Ice watch as Ice extends his hand forward. He watches quietly and says, "Interesting." Then she turns away, crying, and explains, "This is what's going on." She hesitates and stutters, Ice bows an apology as Wade asks why, then assures her that he won't complain about her magic despite her offer to carry bags and do whatever. He says that his gravity has become stronger and he finds it difficult to use, while she advises him not to underestimate his magic, calling it useful. The woman asks the man to try to use magic while holding his hand on the dummy, then she uses Ice Strike, breaking the dummy while he asks if it is broken. Wade confirms that Ice's magic is strong as she smiles, then he carefully steps on the slippery floor, saying that it is not slippery. Clay stands on the edge of a cliff, and Wade thanks him for saving him, saying that he should live. Ice thanks Wade for the speed, admitting that her eyes weren't aware of him and he thought it was gravity magic. Wade thanks Ice for saving him with her magic, which can quickly freeze enemies, while she silently looks down. Wade sits by the fire with a spear, commenting on the powerful spell from the first battle, then notices the poison weapon and wonders about its nature. Wade reports the defeat of 3 monsters and offers to sell the loot later, while Clay notices poison on the first floor and Stella replies, "Oh okay." Drop's group moves cautiously through the dark cave, carrying torches and backpacks, exploring the narrow passage ahead. Wade explains how he has been kind to Stella since she was a child, saving her from loneliness and harmful hobbies, introducing her to his friends despite her weak magic. Wade leans back, explaining as the woman asks why someone would choose him, remembering her past efforts for Ice and doubting Wade's magical abilities. The man orders something to be thrown, waving away 2 weaklings, while the woman reacts angrily, trying to say something but is interrupted. A man with a long beard and disheveled hair said the word food with a frightening grin, causing the blonde girl to freeze in shock, and a monster's paw appeared nearby. He struck the monster, causing it to howl, while nearby in the passageway, Clay breathed heavily and lowered his weapon. Ice praised her comrade, amazed at his ability to fight in mid-air. He told her about the new spell, explaining that he had chosen a lone goblin to test it on, and she responded with interest and asked about magic. He stood alone in the middle of the wide arena, pondering the meaning of the expression to lose weight, trying to figure out if strength was making him lighter, not just heavier. Activating the magic seal on his hand, he commanded the second spell to manifest itself, hoping that this would make the task much easier. The magic lifted him into the air, and he floated with ease, commenting on the unusual sensations, then prepared for landing, adjusting to the weightlessness. He flew over the city, surrounded by glowing spheres, heading towards the arena and the tall building near the tent. Sliding easily through the cave, he explained that he had combined lightness with heaviness for a new attack, while Ice held the torch behind him. He raised the torch and spoke a word of admiration, and the girl looked at him, then they rushed down a deep tunnel, and a scream echoed. He offered to help her, and she agreed, after which they moved together along the dark corridor, following the given direction. In the depths they spotted a manticore, and he warned Ice that he would attack from behind when she created the right opportunity. He sharply demanded silence from the wounded man, who begged not to die, while Ice prepared a healing spell. He and Clay prepared to fight, weapons in hand, and Ice took up a stance with her blade as a massive monster burst out of the darkness. The weakened creature cried out for help, people ran away in panic, one of them asked if the beast understood human speech, and the other answered negatively. He assumed that the monster was just imitating the sounds, and at that moment the beast growled at the group, and Clay shouted for it to stop. He rushed at the giant with his sword in hand, declaring his determination as the monster swung its clawed paw. He kicked the creature away with a powerful kick, while Clay and Ice watched from behind. The girl asked about his condition, and he assured her that his magic could withstand the strain. He admitted that the attack had been deadly in force, but the enemy was still alive, and Clay gripped the blade and looked up, realizing the weight of the blow. The mentor explained that the enemy had to be immobilized before finishing it off, while another watched the creature writhing in pain and noted that the situation looked extremely alarming. Clay told him to retreat and promised to buy him some time, standing with his shield in his hands and a determined look on his face. He told the monster not to take all the glory for himself, while the monster roared in pain. His comrade assured him that he was still able to fight, preparing for another attack. Clay clenched his fists and noticed that he only had his own hands, while the other pointed out that they remained empty. Grabbing a weapon, Clay agreed to stop the threat while his allies stood behind the massive beast, preparing to distract it. He threw the stones and, straining his strength, made a desperate attempt to end the massacre of the beast. Clay brought the heavy hammer down on the giant's mouth, and the dark-haired man next to him clenched his fist. After the blow, he jumped down to several smaller creatures. With a powerful blow, he caused a crack in the ground and loudly cast an earthquake spell. His comrade called out to Ice, and she responded by casting an ice spell that struck the massive creature. A fair-haired man in armor raised his shield against the icebound monster, and behind him stood a woman with long golden hair, watching the scene. He and Ice watched the massive beast trapped in a crystal-like prison. He asked if victory had been achieved, while Clay took a weapon from another fighter who asked for a moment. He called the others cowards and demanded that they move faster, carrying the wounded as they searched for a way deeper into the cave. Stella walked ahead, her face tense, and he carried a torch and gestured. Behind them came Clay, a man with another torch, and a woman with long blonde hair. He explained that the cancelled field training was to involve a lone monster that had become separated from its pack, while soldiers carried away the wounded man and ordered the others back to the barracks. He praised his comrades for their efforts and warned them not to let anyone die in vain. Clay added praise for their performance, and together they looked down on the city. He asked the name of one of his companions again, and the man answered in surprise. He then asked if he had forgotten about him, while Ice and Clay watched nearby. Flame scratched his head and admitted that he rarely remembered people he didn't interact with much, unless someone stood out especially. Stella apologized to Clay, explaining that the master was different from the others. He smiled with his eyes closed, and Clay thought about his unusualness. Clay introduced himself as an earth mage and shook hands with his interlocutor, who doubted his words, and Ice, with slight embarrassment, confirmed her mastery of ice magic. Clay asked for his name, and the fire magic user remarked that it was easy to remember other people's names. Behind him stood the ice magic user, activating the earth spell. He clenched his hand, noting that he had no time to talk, and began to descend the steps, the others following him across the town square. Flame wondered why some couples would dare to enter the dungeon despite the deadly dangers as the group of adventurers descended into the dark cavern that resembled a labyrinth of malice. He explained that no one would risk their life if they were sure they would die from a large monster, and Clay listened carefully, preparing to answer. Flame agreed with his words, and he added that they do not enter the dungeon in groups of less than 3, in order to avoid solo trips and reduce losses, while the small creature curiously asked him questions. They discussed how the death of individuals was almost inevitable, since being wounded in a dungeon without support was equivalent to death, and the chances of salvation appeared only if there were allies. Clay looked over his gear and noted that leather armor was useless against the dungeon's malice. He said he would have to save up for stronger armor, walking alongside him and Ice. They stopped together, and he was lost in thought about recent events. Clay asked about the price, and Ice asked for a full set of reliable weapons. He suggested that they go shopping in the future and pick out everything they needed, mentioning that they had things for sale. Ice agreed, smiling slightly. Clay thanked him for taking him along, and he vigorously agreed. Clenching his fist, he praised his comrade for his courage in the battle with the antimatter core, calling it the makings of a true hero. The others looked on in amazement. The woman noted his determination, saying that relying on his fists had saved many. He modestly denied exaggeration. He praised Clay and Ice for their bravery and strength, causing Ice to become embarrassed and ask him to stop, and Clay admitted that these words meant a lot to him. Stella crossed her arms and questioned his judgment, but he confidently replied that everything was indeed crystal clear, and added to the group that they were both great. He asked what they were trying to do, and Ice stood there with her arms crossed. The group hesitated until she said she had heard something strange and wanted to investigate. Flame denied the accusations, and he was standing behind Stella, who was listening to someone on the sidelines condemning Clay's magic. He chided her for taking risks, noting that they lacked the strength to finish off the monster. She countered that he had not intervened, and questioned his decision to ignore the manticore. Stella admitted that she was of no use in the fight and admitted that she was aware of it, shaking with excitement. He answered her in a calm voice. She burst into tears, adding that she had come to sincerely thank them for saving everyone. He apologized for being too strict, and Clay quietly commented on what was happening. He apologized to her again for being so abrupt, and Clay jokingly called him a heartbreaker. Then Stella burst into tears even louder, and he stroked her head, praising her for trying despite her fear. They stood in a tight group in tense silence as several of the teenagers shared memories of the past and the traumas they had suffered. Clay wondered if genetics might have made him more resilient to psychological blows, while he reflected on how he himself seemed devoid of such scars, even though he knew they must have left a mark. He thanked her for her appreciation and asked her to stop insulting him, then told Ice to leave. She quietly replied that she would stay. He asked if everyone was okay and ready to say goodbye. Clay confirmed that he was okay, and Stella quietly agreed that she was okay too. He announced his intention to rest and perhaps take a nap. The two girls looked at each other and watched him go, and he wondered to himself how he could take advantage of the opportunity. Stella asked Ice if she liked someone. Ice got nervous, and Stella added that she simply considered him a decent person, for no other reason. Ice hesitantly admitted that she might like him and tried to explain her words, but Stella flushed and demanded clarification. Stella spoke hesitantly, and Ice asked if she had heard from anyone that he was indifferent to her, or if it was just her guess. Stella stated that Ice was making assumptions, came closer and insistently demanded an answer, to which he only responded with displeasure. Stella asked him why he did that, and he noted that she had always remained obedient and exemplary as they walked down the narrow alley. Flane accused the girl of having feelings for him, and she was surprised to realize the truth. He pushed Ice against the wall and she fell backwards, clutching her head, while he stood over her, leaning his hand on the stone surface. Stella was punched and pinned against the wall, and she screamed, claiming that he would never show interest in another, calling him an ungrateful and dirty magic user. She accused her rival of interfering in her personal affairs and launched a magical attack, while he closely watched the development of the scene. Stella hit the crying girl and mocked her, claiming that there was no kind-hearted protector nearby, and no one would come to her aid even in tears. She touched Ice's face and declared that she would now get what she wanted, and Ice looked up in complete shock. Grabbing Ice by the collar, Stella ordered him to make him fall in love with her, starting right now. She approached another person with a proposal for cooperation and promised that everything would work out for him, after which she clarified whether he understood her words. Stella handed the reading girl a bag and told her to get rid of the books, and she replied that she found reading boring. She mockingly ridiculed Ice's crafts, promising to distract her from her useless activity, while the others teased the girl, claiming that without Stella, she was worthless. In the center stood a lone girl, and around her were 5 women, whispering and pointing at her, repeating the word drop. The man asked Ice if she was sure about her decision, warning her that the place was full of slum scum, and she calmly replied that she could handle it. The man advised the woman to take care of her health and rest, because she expressed a desire to become an adventurer. She held his hands, trying to calm him down. Stella smiled and admitted that she was looking forward to the future, feeling strong enough to undertake any endeavor, and people around her thanked her father. On the street, a man was harshly reprimanding the group, while a woman with long blonde hair stood to the side, thinking about the many slum dwellers and trying to remain calm. Stella grabbed Ice's hands and asked why she was there. Ice replied that she had decided to become an adventurer so that she could protect herself in the market. The crowd formed a line. One remarked on the enormous size of the place, another asked about her. The girl mentally resolved not to lose. Soon her appearance was announced, and she threw several things on the ground, calling them disgusting and offering others to take them. The older woman was distributing the sleeping places, telling Icy to accept the order without objection, although she hesitated. The man next to her clenched his fist. He ran ahead of a group of girls who were chasing him. Then he gestured calmly, but 2 of them complained irritably that they could have done better without him. The woman ordered Ice to stay right behind her and announced that she had assembled a team of 6 people. She then screamed at the girl, demanding unquestioning obedience. He introduced himself as a gravity mage, standing up for Ice, who responded shyly, while Stella watched them from afar in surprise. He defeated his opponent by using a slow spell in a duel. He and Ice stood on a huge magical hand, and she clutched the book to her chest, thinking about the courage she had gained from him. He flexed his arm confidently, and Ice clenched her fists next to him, acknowledging that his support had helped her move forward. Stella mused that it was all due to his presence as he and Ice prepared for another fight, him drawing his blade and her directing ice spells at the advancing enemies. Stella asked another woman the question, who replied that she didn't think it was the best and intended to try it herself.
Stella offered to lend the man if he proved boring.
The scene changed to a view of Clay standing determinedly in the dark shadows. She demanded an affirmative answer and pushed the man, causing him to look surprised and afraid, after which she called him mean and ungrateful. Stella tried to get up, but found that her feet were stuck to the ground, and she was surprised to realize that she couldn't move. Ice explained to her comrade that he inspired her to find new ways to use ice magic, and activated the spell, freezing the wall. The woman cast an ice spell, specifying that it could hold objects in place, and the other man reacted with surprise. She grabbed her opponent by the shoulders and pushed her down, accompanying the action with an explanation, and she protested and begged him to stop. Lying on the ground in the smoke, one said that she herself had now become icy, while the other ordered her to remain stuck to the floor. Stella asked the woman if she was ready to give up everything pleasant, and added a question about herself, after which she leaned closer. She gasped and sank to the ground. One of the women insistently demanded an explanation, but the other, remaining calm, asked her not to shout and admitted that she had always hated her harsh voice. The man covered her mouth, suppressing her resistance and muffled sounds, and ordered her to fall. The woman admitted that meeting the master made her happier than ever. She described him as an extraordinary person who managed to overcome hardships, not give up and become stronger than everyone, despite the difficult magic. Stella begged for her life, trembling with fear and surrounded by the roar and crackle. Another woman demanded assurances that she would never speak to Wade again as she lay wounded near the destroyed building. In desperation, she screamed that she would leave and quit the academy, giving up her career as an adventurer, just to never get close to him again. A woman with long blonde hair stood over the defeated monster and said that she was tired of the constant threats of monsters in the dungeon. Stella ordered someone to leave immediately, promising to pack and send his things, and then the scene changed to the image of a motionless man lying on the ground. The blonde woman watched as the man with the short haircut ran up the stairs. He tripped and collapsed at the top, and she exhaled heavily. He clenched his fist and said that he had no intention of humiliating anyone, and Ice stood next to him with a bag and a sword on her side. Stella noted that the master looked amazing, her eyes sparkling as she looked up. The girl called passers-by to come to the counter, where a variety of weapons and armor were offered in one place. Clay raised his hand, showing off his new armor, and said he'd spent the money for the invitation. He asked what he looked like. He asked what happened while his comrade covered his mouth, and Ice thought that the armor was too expensive and almost equal to a full set. He praised Clay, who responded quietly, after which they agreed to look into the store together. Stella watched them from afar. They entered a shop where a woman invited them in. Recognizing the group, she offered a deal, and he asked to evaluate the goods he had brought. He offered the goblin's poison knife. Clay agreed to the exchange and added a bonus. He thanked him for his help. Clay promised to meet later, and Flame suggested they go shopping and meet again. He and Ice supported the idea. He watched as Clay donned his new armor, remembering that he had joined their group 2 or 3 days after leaving the academy. He cast magic, thinking about his comrade's potential loss after meeting the monster. At that moment, the girl pulled his sleeve and quietly apologized. Stella hesitantly asked him for advice on choosing a weapon. He replied that he was hardly the best mentor in this matter, but agreed to help. He asked if she had a weapon, and Ice confirmed that she did. He then asked if she wanted something that would work with her magic. Ice wished for a light weapon with a long-range strike and imagined casting an ice spell on the blade to enhance her attack. He approved of her idea, and she blushed shyly and thanked him. After that, he analyzed the tactics based on combining magic with wood and metal to strike. He explained to Ice that rapiers or foils were better suited for her ice, allowing her to channel energy faster, as opposed to sabers, which left deep wounds. The man spoke of the rarity of orichalcum used by the nobility, while the young warrior looked at the broken shield and the fallen boar, and the woman next to him listened silently. He added that the rapiers were strong enough and suggested taking 2 at once for reliability. Stella agreed, noting that it was better to be prepared. He showed 2 blades, explaining that they were standard cheap models, and suggested adding a parrying dagger for the left hand. The girl thanked him, holding the weapons. A man with spiky blonde hair examined a mace while a woman with long blonde hair explained its magical properties and protective capabilities.
Stella chuckled quietly and decided to buy 2 rapiers and a small mace. He asked Ice to help him choose a weapon, and she nodded, answering enthusiastically. The armed man asked if they were trying out heavy weapons. He confirmed that Ice was helping with the selection, but she noted that such samples were too bulky for her. They stood together as the man laughed, claiming he was not made to carry heavy things. In response, he showed the magic seal on his palm and said his strength made up for it. He explained the specifics of his gravity magic, and Clay apologized, noting that he only knew rumors and mentally noted the need to remember the real name of the spell. Clay asked if he planned to buy anything, but he said he preferred the existing weapons. Ice, despite her unsuccessful attempts to try out the heavier types, insisted on her willingness to help. He and Clay exchanged glances, after which Clay teased him by claiming he had something nice in mind. He denied it, and Stella sheepishly apologized. Klein also apologized, and he told him not to think Ice was incapable. Klein meanwhile looked at the weapons on the walls, considering the cutting blades more suitable than the hammers and clubs. He tested the claymore sword, and Ice watched his movements, commenting on his skill and listing the different types of blades on display in the shop. He and another adventurer were examining a huge, battered sword among other weapons, discussing its size and whether it could only be used in large dungeons. He leapt down with his sword, slamming it down on the monster. The creature was wounded and staggered back, and he stood next to it, watching it fall. Flane asked warily what the sound was. He looked surprised, and behind Flane stood Stella, holding a rifle. He explained that one of the cadets had forged a heavy weapon. Clay listened attentively, and then he demonstrated his magic, which allowed him to make massive objects lighter. Clay said that the cabinet contained an artifact that was too large and had not been touched for many years. The man with the bandage on his head looked sternly and declared that he knew how to deal with inexperienced upstarts, teaching them a proper lesson. The woman admitted that he was difficult to judge, and he asked if she wanted him to prove his strength. She called out to one of the men present to pick up the dull blade and snapped her fingers, offering the weapon for free. He asked for permission with enthusiasm, and the woman laughed, noting his youthful appearance. Clay sighed heavily, and Stella noted that he looked unusually pleased. He raised a huge sword, shrouded in a shining aura, and everyone around him watched in amazement. He swung the blade with one hand while another man mockingly commented on his magic. The woman below warned him not to swing such a heavy weapon with one hand. He lifted the massive log and the woman told him not to worry. Clay noticed Stella's head spin slightly, amazed by his unexpected strength. He asked for a smaller weapon, and another showed a pair of armored gloves, asking if they would fit. He clenched his fist and said he would take them. The woman replied that she was happy to work with him. Clay offered 2 armors, and Stella hesitated, reminding him that she had already bought one. Flane offered to split the cost of the goblin knife between himself and the woman. He agreed, deciding half for himself and half for her. He offered to split it evenly, since they had defeated the goblin together. But Ice refused, shaking her head and clutching her sword in a defensive gesture. He told Ice that she was the one who killed the goblin and thanked her for saving him from the third attack. Clay and Flane were watching from behind. Clay told him to stop flirting and noticed that the shopping was finished. He loudly denied everything and Clay ordered a drink for 2, which irritated him. The man wished the woman good luck and added that winning someone over could be difficult. She reacted with bewilderment and confusion. He laughed as the girl motioned for him to be quiet. Then he offered to take her on a date and pay for the expenses. He laughed again, explaining that he was joking, and rushed over to Ice, who was breathing heavily and looked exhausted. Clay asked worriedly what had happened. With a confident look, he activated the magic, and a pack of wolf-like creatures moved forward with a growl. He slammed his fist into the massive beast, then prepared to attack again. The monster roared and charged at him, but fell dead after his counterattack. Having confirmed his actions, he threw down the torch and rushed into the attack, asking his opponent if he thought he would be left alone. Ice used an ice strike, freezing the attacking skeletons, and Clay swung his hammer, smashing the frozen enemies. Stella noted the ease of the victory, and then applause broke out, accompanied by an enthusiastic cry. He praised the strategy and teamwork. Clay acknowledged that the gloves suited him, and Ice agreed on the importance of adjusting fighting styles.
He suggested going up to the surface, feeling tired after being underground for so long.
Clay showed a device that resembled a compass, indicating their long stay below.
He asked if it was a magical chronometer, but Clay warned him about silver-rank seekers and suggested leaving early.
Ice was standing nearby.
Clay asked his friend about his origins, and he confirmed with a smile that his father was a baron.
Ice listened in silence.
He cautiously admitted that he too belonged to the nobility and was the third son of a baron, which surprised both Clay and Ice. He thought about the life of a slave in the rigid hierarchy of magical society, while Ice and Clay discussed a noble who had undergone an initiation ritual and received a higher rank. They heard the armed man explain that baron was a lower title, inherited by birthright.
The woman asked how much higher the rank of count was. They stood in the cave.
He noticed that he was among nobles, and Clay listened silently as the narrative revealed the ranks and duties of the aristocracy in the royal family. The armored warrior spoke of the baron's weak position and limited power, while the young man reflected on leadership and acknowledged the difficulties nobles faced. Clay declined to elaborate further, saying that he was the reason he joined the group and asked them not to change. He wondered if leadership was worth it before graduating, holding the torch in his hand. Ice and the other cadet listened, and then they walked through the city gates, and he thought about the future again. The story featured 3 paths for adventurers: swordsmen fought as soldiers, archers hunted monsters for the guild, and newbies gathered herbs for medicinal purposes. A group of adventurers, including a heavily armed fighter, entered the dungeon. Someone's hand held a carved object over a bowl of liquid.
The girl told him there would be trouble if he didn't eat.
He agreed, but his thoughts kept returning to what he would do after finishing his studies. He was wondering what kind of adventurer he wanted to be after graduation, and Stella offered to join him, expressing her willingness to support any decision. He asked the girl if she had entered the academy for her own purpose, and she clenched her fists as she listened to his words. Ice admitted that she had run away from home, and he reflected on how they were both fugitives, enjoying their current freedom despite the uncertainty of the future. Walking down a noisy city street, he recalled his past life, when he got an office job, was content with 3 meals a day and sent out applications without much enthusiasm. He lay on the floor, thinking about the hardships of his past job, and asked Clay what he wanted to do after graduation while they were eating together. He extended his hand and invited the man to join, explaining that he had a torch with his name on it and calling himself a hero.
Stella asked him not to interfere and noted that everyone should decide their own future, without strange invitations that could influence their choice.
He listened in silence as Flint apologized and admitted that he had been dissuaded from insisting, while Stella reflected on the unexpected respect he commanded. He ate with difficulty, and Stella watched him. Another man mentioned his burden, and Stella gently added that he should do what brought him joy. He ate from a bowl and asked for relief, because he was still growing. The man next to him noticed that worries were keeping him awake at night. Over the meal, she and Ice got to talking, and she reminisced about the past, and Clay loudly responded from the next table, denying her words about his former size. He led the party down the dungeon stairs, followed by Stella and Clay. Along the way, he discussed with the man about obtaining spells and meeting the monster, and then prepared to fight off the thieves with Clay. He clenched his fists and said that after tomorrow's test they would graduate. Clay sniffled and remarked that the good old days were ending, but Ice said that it wasn't goodbye. In an empty hall he sat at a table with another man who asked him about his plans. He considered trying out the sword, bow, and torch.
He laughed as his companion tried to decide.
The group discussed the tests and the possibility of replacing the sword with a torch. Flane, reading the newspaper, reported that he was close to obtaining 3 types of adventurer badges.
Ice added that he could qualify for all of them at once.
He replied that he already had 2 spells and hoped to have a 3rd by the 5th floor. The man next to him remarked that he was able to turn miracles into the ordinary. He clenched his fist and thanked his comrades for their words of encouragement, and 2 of them encouraged him to give his best. He suggested they go to bed, and Ice agreed. They walked out of the building together, and Clay waved from the stairs, saying he'd see her tomorrow. He announced that he was going to practice and headed towards the target in the spacious hall. Ice addressed him as master and came closer. He asked if she wanted to say a final goodbye, and the girl admitted that she had seen him leave for the street. He asked if she had finished packing, and Ice confirmed it. He then added that he had finished packing, too, since he only had a weapon and a change of clothes. Stella offered to help, but noticed that there were too many people there. He laughed and reminded her that she was not allowed in the male dormitory, to which she quietly agreed. They sat on a wooden railing under the night sky, discussing the day ahead when they would become full-fledged adventurers. She asked if he was nervous, and he admitted that he was. He stroked her head and told her not to worry too much, because everything would work out. She reacted to his words with surprise and disbelief. He apologized and asked if he had gone too far, and she, embarrassed, replied that he had not, and admitted that she did not mind if he did it as much as he wanted. He asked if she would really stay with him, reminding her that they were cadets in the same group, and added that he did not want to embarrass her. He smiled and said that it suited him. She blushed and insisted that she was doing it of her own free will and felt no obligation. He asked her about her dreams, mentioning that Clay wanted to be a hero. She quietly replied that her wish was a secret. Ice confirmed that she would keep the secret until graduation tomorrow, and he said that they should try even harder. He admitted that he envied those who had clear goals, and she urged him not to rush and assured him that he would understand everything with time. Their conversation continued on the roof. He said they were ready, but they should still have a good rest. She agreed and wished him good night. The story reminded us of the forgotten main rule: being an adventurer means risking your life. The man announced the start of the final exam, and the group, which included Clay and the blonde girl, prepared to go out. He led the squad through the shaft, Clay carrying gear behind Ice as she walked alongside him. He announced that they were heading to the 5th floor. He led them down the stone stairs, explaining that the goal was level 5, the required level to attain the rank of Bronze Torch. Clay and Ice decided not to take any unnecessary risks. He raised his staff as Clay and Ice took up fighting positions. Winged demons appeared ahead, advancing through the tunnel. They prepared for battle, and after the skirmish, they moved further into the depths. Flane ordered the team to remain cautious on the 4th floor. He agreed, and Clay confirmed the readiness as they entered the rocky corridor. He activated his magic, jumped up, and knocked down 3 approaching creatures with his massive weapon. He delivered a powerful blow to the monster's torso, lifted it by the head and threw it aside, noting that he was glad to know about it. He apologized for not giving the others a chance to shine. Clay remarked that sometimes it was nice to not have to work hard, and then he thanked Ice, who acknowledged that he had done a great job. She hesitated, pressing her hand to her chest, and asked if the dungeon boss was a chimera. Flame looked determined and asked if they had a chance of winning. Soon, shouts from the allies were heard, declaring that they had come to help. Clay warned of the impending danger as he prepared to fight. The girl fighting on the ground asked if helping his comrade was his priority. Clay shouted out a fire arrow spell and declared that they would not return home until the target was destroyed. He struck the giant monster with a red-hot spear as it charged at 2 fallen allies, and cursed as he continued his attack. Klein teased him, offering to make himself an easier target, but he responded defiantly and prepared to draw his blade. Clay watched in surprise as Flame released his magical power. Ice watched as the monster hit the ground in a furious attack. He stood in front with a massive weapon, and the fighters gathered behind him. In front of them stood 2 beasts, a lion and a goat with curved horns. He addressed the chimera, saying that his blade needed to be tested, and this creature was perfect for the test. Clay stood in front of the roaring lion, clutching his weapon and preparing to fight. 2 monsters, a roaring lion and a hissing snake, clashed fiercely above the entrance to the cave. A man nearby covered his ears from the deafening sound. He responded mockingly to the beast's roar and rushed forward with his sword raised. Flame prepared to strike again at the chimera and ordered his allies to attack with all means when it weakened. Clay agreed to let the other lead the squad while he and Ice charged forward, at which time Flame noticed a lion approaching with a weapon that resembled a chainsaw. He and another warrior stood guard, and a third ordered to wait for the enemy to change his movements before striking. He pointed ahead and told them to pay attention to the goat, and another asked if it made any sounds. Flame ordered the goat's head to be struck and gathered everyone to interrupt the spell, warning of its power and demanding that it be destroyed before it was completed. He cast a fire spell, launching a red-hot projectile towards the huge monster. He engaged the lion in combat, plunging his sword into its body as Ice rushed to help from behind. Ice fought the snake-like creature, fending off its attacks with her sword as her staff fell to the stone floor. Stella lay on the ground, clutching her wounded arm to her chest, and spoke to him, who was off camera. Clay persistently asked if she could be saved, but she, with tears in her eyes, asked him not to worry and to shut up. Clay pulled out a vial of antidote and said he would try it. He agreed, despite warning that the boss monster's poison might not be treatable. Flane ordered the victim to be pulled aside and made comfortable, and Clay responded with a curt yes. He and the girl stood nearby. He told the wounded woman that she didn't need to be too harsh and thanked her and Clay for helping him fight the snake part of the chimera. She apologized and asked to let her do something. He took 2 swords, activated the magic, and said that he would use them. The girl responded by calling him master and calling him to victory. He took a fighting stance with his weapon as the huge beast approached them, while Clay carried Ice, assuring her that she would be safe with him. Clay called him to stop playing, but he, preparing for battle, replied that the task was difficult, but entirely doable. They met the 2-headed chimera together in a cave, preparing to attack. He asked about the moment of attack, and Clay suggested waiting for the monster to make the first move. He declared that he would cut the enemy down if it tried to attack, and ordered them to attack as soon as the monster used magic, adding that Ice's rapiers would be able to finish it off. Flane activated the magic, raising his hand, promising to make an accurate shot, and he confidently ordered to act. He crouched down with the blade in his hands, looking at the roaring lion and the horned beast approaching him in the cave. One of the men shouted a fireball spell as the lion-like monster lunged forward. The other raised a bolt of fire, calling for his comrade to rise. Clay encouraged him to get up and then asked him why he was smiling after being hit in the head. He responded with confusion. He smiled widely, covering his face with his hand, and 2 armored men walked through the tunnel, one of them looking back anxiously. He clenched his fist and slammed it against the stone wall, declaring that moments like these were what he lived for. The lion-like monster rushed at the armored warrior while he was pondering his future in choice of path. He stood with his bow and sword at the ready while the others lay on the ground. Then he leaped through the forest, clutching his blade. The man clenched his fist tightly, and the lion roared with fury. The roar of his heartbeat could be heard in the silence, and he confessed that he loved the thrill of mortal combat. An armored warrior held a sword, and a roaring lion towered before him. The narrative described a deadly confrontation and intense duel. He stood with his sword in hand in front of the huge chimera, wondering how to defeat it, despite being too wounded to fight at full strength. Clay asked if he was okay and clear-headed. He looked determined and calmly confirmed that everything was under control. He wondered why he had to follow the rules of combat when he could fight as his own will dictated. At that moment, his armored hand glowed, reflecting his inner determination. Clay called out to him as he moved forward, and Flane warned him that he had lost his mind. He replied that he would not wait any longer, and prepared to act against the chimera. He jumped, thinking about using gravity magic to become lighter than air, while the lion roared below. Flipped in the air with a blade in his hands, he threatened to crush the enemy. Flane attacked the beast with his sword, but it grabbed him. Someone called its name, and the beast, surrounded by dark energy, began to mutter. He struck the lion's head with a heavy weapon, and another warrior shouted a warning that he might be torn to pieces. Flane noticed a figure being carried by the air current, and then the man soared into the sky using magic. He activated the spell and declared that he would put the chimera to sleep forever. The creature roared and the earth shook with fury. He decided to go to someone, but the others called him back, trying to stop him. He sat on the bed, looking around as Clay and Ice approached. Several armed men were nearby in the room. The man told another that 2 of their second group had died after leaving the dungeon. Outside, people were tending to the fallen. Another said he had heard the story from a friend in Flane, who had recently left the room. Several armored figures and 2 seated people listened attentively. He asked Ice if she was okay. She admitted that she had let her guard down and the poison had spread through her blood. The others discussed how normal antidotes were useless against the chimera's poison. He confirmed the news of 1 dead, 2 seriously wounded and 3 injured in the battle with the chimera, adding that there was nothing more to say. Two armored guards walked down the hallway, and the man on the bench waved at the approaching man. Then one of the warriors thanked the other for his hard work after completing the briefing. The old man looked over the list of incidents involving him. He sat cross-legged and answered briefly, looking focused. He said that only seasoned veterans could handle something like that. Ice remained silent, and Clay pointed out that a bronze adventurer should not challenge a chimera. One man warned another that his rapid growth would surpass those around him. They stood on the Hill of Swords, and the second man was embarrassed by the unexpected compliment. He asked what he should do next, and the armored warrior replied that he had to make that decision himself. A woman stood nearby, watching calmly. The man gave instructions on the strength, talent, and knowledge needed for the path of an adventurer, asking them to listen to him carefully. He explained that adventurers live freely, ignoring even the orders of monarchs, and pointed out that the final decision always remains with the person himself. He confirmed that he would act on his own choice. The man praised the determination in his gaze and announced his graduation from the academy. He remembered receiving the third spell just when he needed it. He was soon congratulated for becoming the fifth cadet to earn 3 adventurer's badges upon graduation. He adjusted his necklace as the mentor explained that past graduates had reached silver and gold levels, only one had managed to reach platinum, and not all had lived to see it. He told his comrade to make every effort, but warned him not to risk his life in vain. He thanked her for the instructions. Ice, Clay, and another man were nearby, and they were informed that from now on they would have to provide their own beds. He was surprised to hear the girl promise to fight with him and become stronger. The other man asked what exactly she was talking about. People whispered about his victory over the chimera, doubting the veracity of the rumors and asking each other questions. Clay offered to help him get out the window, and Ice asked to let her deal with the obstacles herself. Clay again offered to help them escape, but Ice insisted on doing it herself. He agreed, got out, and arranged to meet them later at the guild. He leaned on his weapon and admitted that he would rather have another fight with the chimera than the attention of a curious crowd. Clay crouched against the wall, clutching his blade. He jumped out of the window. Clay asked him why and he left the answer to his imagination, after which Clay apologized for not being able to save one of them. Flame mockingly called someone smug and remarked that he would rather see him in the dungeon. He looked puzzled. He caught the dagger Flame threw and thanked him. Flame turned and warned him of his appearance on the surface. Klein offered to rent a room and asked Ice if she would meet him at the guild, reminding her that she could always ask for help if needed. Stella hesitated, but agreed to reveal the secret if everything went well and they graduated tomorrow. He overheard their conversation nearby. He looked at the monster and realized that it was beyond his power, wondering how they could even be around such a threat. The girl thought that he would only become stronger, but she felt weak, remembering that she knew only one spell. She was consoled by the thought that it was he who made her magic useful. Stella cried, repeating that she wanted to stay with him forever, but was afraid that at this rate she would be left behind. She watched the group near the huge creature and thought that he would never choose her, but would leave her if she remained weak. The girl clutched her head, deciding that she had to become stronger and more powerful. At that moment, the armored man lifted her up, determined to support Master Wade. She looked up, and there were tears and blood on her face. He prepared to strike with his sword. A female figure hovered nearby, and she looked at the glowing symbol on her hand, doubting her own role. She cast the ice creation spell and, kneeling down, summoned a vortex of frost magic around her. Ice held the tiny creature in her palm, admiring it and noticing that it had its own consciousness. The little creature jumped onto her hand. She wondered if this meant he was subservient and thanked him, explaining that he would help her cast spells from a distance. The girl opened the door and said that it was time to go to Master Wade, after which she stood up, quietly apologizing to herself. She ran through the city, dreaming of being strong enough to never leave Master Wade. The crowd gathered at a large building with a fountain. Ice caught her breath when he responded to her sudden call. She hesitantly tried to reveal her secret dream despite the presence of the crowd. Stella confessed that she wanted to give someone happiness. He was surprised by her words, and behind him there was a joyful jubilation. He spoke to her, remembering how he had won and grown stronger time after time, risking his life against powerful enemies, and admitting his fear of the day when no one would be able to challenge him. She said she didn't want him to suffer. He hesitated, then apologized and admitted that he thought too much. She listened calmly and answered without emotion. He stood facing the crowd, and she reminded him that he didn't need to change anything. He nervously agreed to meet their expectations, then laughed and reassured someone, telling them not to worry. He complimented Ice for not underestimating him. Clay came over and apologized for the delay, offering them a place to stay for the night and asking if they had sold their loot. He showed a bag of coins and explained that he had received an advance payment because they could not pay everything at once, adding that one fong cost a whole gold coin. He remembered the woman from the guild saying that the quests required a group of 4 people. Clay and Ice were surprised, and he apologized for approaching them too abruptly. He reassured them while Ice expressed relief, and added that they needed to find another companion. There was a recruitment flyer on the board. He informed the group that the guild would notify him if anyone showed up. He then suggested that they get some food and head to the inn. Clay and Ice agreed, and he thanked them. Several people were studying the bulletin board, discussing their distrust of slow magic and the girl who could wield ice but not water. One woman wondered who would dare to accept such conditions. She looked at the wall covered with announcements and wondered what it meant. The woman clutched her head, thinking that she should become stronger and more powerful. At that moment, the armored man lifted her up, determined to support Master Wade. She looked up, tears mixed with blood glistening on her face. He prepared to strike with his sword. A female figure hovered nearby, and another looked at the glowing magical symbol on her hand, doubting her role. The girl cast an ice creation spell and, kneeling down, summoned a whirlwind of cold magic around herself. Ice held the tiny creature in her palm, admiring it and noticing that it had its own consciousness. The little creature jumped onto her hand. She wondered if this meant submission and thanked it, explaining that it would help her cast spells from a distance. The woman opened the door and said it was time to meet Master Wade. Then she stood up, silently apologizing to herself. She ran through the city, dreaming of becoming strong enough to never leave it, and a crowd was already gathering around a large building with a fountain. Ice was catching her breath when he responded to her sudden call. She hesitantly tried to tell him about her cherished dream, despite the presence of people around her. Stella confessed that she wanted to make someone happy. He reacted with surprise, and behind him the crowd cheered her words. He spoke to the girl, remembering how he had won and grown stronger time after time, risking his life against formidable enemies, but he feared the day when there would be no more rivals for him. She said she didn't want him to suffer. He hesitated, then apologized, admitting he was getting too caught up in his thoughts, and she listened calmly and responded without unnecessary emotion. He stood facing the crowd while the woman told him he didn't have to change anything. He nervously agreed to do as expected. Then he laughed and reassured one of the people, telling them not to worry. He praised Ice for not letting herself be underestimated. Clay came over and apologized for the delay, offering them a place to stay for the night and asking if they had managed to sell the trophies. He showed a bag of coins and explained that he had only received an advance payment because they had not been able to pay in full. He also noted that one fong cost a whole gold coin. He remembered the guild members' words that a party of 4 was required to complete the quests. Clay and Ice had reacted with surprise, and he had apologized for being too harsh. He tried to calm them down. Ice expressed relief, and he said that they still needed another companion. There was a recruitment notice on the board. He told the group that the guild would let them know if a candidate showed up. He then suggested that they eat and head to the inn. Clay and Ice agreed, and he thanked them. Several people were studying the bulletin board, discussing their distrust of slow magic and the ice wielder who lacked water magic. One of the women wondered who would risk accepting such conditions. She looked at the wall covered with papers and asked what it all meant.